You want to know what will actually be on the November SAT? And I'm going to tell you. Instead of just guessing, I am going to give you 6 question types that will 100% be showing up, and then I will teach you how to solve a couple different variations of each question type, starting with right triangles. Now, within right triangles, you might come across any number of types of right triangle questions, one of them being SOHCAHTOA questions like this one. So if you're not familiar, SOHCAHTOA is going to be spelled like this, and we need to know what this stands for. Basically, these are fractions that equal either sine, cosine, or tangent. So for example, sine, which they're asking about here, is going to be equal to a fraction of O divided by H. O being the opposite and H being the hypotenuse. And hypotenuse is the longest side of the triangle, the one that's across the street from our right angle here. So this would be our hypotenuse. And since they're asking about sine of x, x is in the corner over here. So opposite x would be across the street from x. So opposite 35 divided by hypotenuse h. So we know that in this case, opposite over h is 35 over h, right? So let's take a look at our options and see what's going on here. Tangent of x is going to be TOA, which would be t equals O opposite divided by a, adjacent. So we already know just from looking at this that we're going to end up with different values because the hypotenuse is not involved, right? Because that would be 35 over 27. And we should know that the hypotenuse is going to be larger than both of our legs. So that would never work. So we're not even going to consider choice A. And adjacent is, yeah, just basically the side that is right next to our corner. So opposite is across the street, adjacent is right next to. Tangent of y. Tangent of y would be opposite 27 divided by 35 adjacent. And this also doesn't involve the hypotenuse. So I know that this is never going to work, so I won't even consider it. And let's also keep in mind that we are looking for basically 35 divided by the hypotenuse as our answer. Cosine of x. Cosine of x is going to be the ca. So I'll grab a third color here. Cosine equals a divided by h. So this does involve the hypotenuse, but it has our adjacent divided by the hypotenuse, right? Adjacent is 27, and then the hypotenuse is just, we don't know, but 27 divided by the hypotenuse is never going to be the same thing as 35 divided by the hypotenuse. So that doesn't work, right? And then finally, cosine of y would be adjacent over hypotenuse. But if we look at the value that's right next to y, it's that 35, right? So this is going to be our answer because it's the same thing, 35 divided by the hypotenuse. And if you don't have this memorized, you could certainly go through this process, but you should know that the sine of any given angle is going to be the same value as the cosine of the opposite angle. So basically, if you have a right triangle, you're going to have two acute angles, the guys that are under 90 degrees, and then you're going to have your 90-degree angles. So the relationship that we see between x and y here, that's always going to be the case with our two acute angles. Another right triangle concept you might encounter is special right triangles. And the great thing about special right triangles is you just need to remember that one of them is 30, 60, 90. The other one is 45, 45, 90. Or you need to remember the square root of 2 or the square root of 3. The reason being is if you see either those angles or those square roots, you can just open up your cheat sheet right here, and then it's going to give you the rules. Now, ideally, you have the rules memorized. So for a 30, 60, 90, we've got a little something like this. Your short side is going to be x. Your longest side, aka the hypotenuse, is going to be 2x. And your other leg, the longer leg, is going to be x times the square root of 3, right? So basically, if they're asking for the longest side is going to be 2x, and they give us the perimeter, we know that the perimeter is all of the sides combined, yeah? So we could say that, you know, all the sides, 2x plus x. Oh, my stylus is having a nightmare of a time. Plus x root 3. All this is going to be equal to this up here, right? Now, at this point, we realize we just solve for x and then we plug in 2x and we got our answer. So let's be lazy and get Desmos involved. And instead of using X, I'm going to use L for long. The reason being is we can be even lazier and just get an answer. I'll show you what I mean. So we had 2x, so 2L plus L times the square root of 3. And this is all supposed to be equal to 18 plus 6 root 3, right? We have to use a tilde instead of equals if we're using constants instead of X, just FYI. So 18 plus 6 square root of 3. And it's going to tell us right off the bat that L is 6. And we also know that 2x would be 12. But if you were really, really lazy, you don't want to multiply 6 times 2, you could just say 2L and it'll give you 12, which is really cool. So this is why I did it like this. Alternatively, we could do, 2x plus, and then it'll give us a vertical line with our value. But I was too lazy to bring my mouse over here. That's why I did it the other way. I just wanted to give me the answer. Don't you want it to just give you the answer? But yeah, anyway, our answer here would be 12 because that's 2x, right? Next up, you will absolutely 100% be coming across rhetorical synthesis questions. That is to say, these questions that have student taking notes. And regardless of the type of notes question that you come across, I am going to recommend the same strategy, which is to start by ignoring the notes. So here it says the students wants to emphasize a similarity between the two specimens. We're going to ignore the notes and we're going to just start eliminating based off of that. So choice A, that doesn't even mention specimens, so that's definitely not going to work. Big Mike is the nickname of Tyrannosaurus. That is not mentioning a similarity. C, the dinosaur fossil are both members of this genus, so that would be a similarity. So I'll keep C, but I'm not going to choose C. I'm going to go to D and eliminate. You'll see why in a minute. While this one is house, this one is house. Okay, so this is giving me a difference between them. So my answer very easily is going to be choice C, because it's the only one that gave me a similarity. And for that one, I did not have to look at the notes. Now that said, we want to be careful. We are eliminating answers. We're not choosing an answer. And let's take a look at this question and see why. So this one says, the student wants to describe how DLS cures 3D objects. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start eliminating. A says, DLS is a form of manufacturing, which I don't see any mention of curing. So A is out. B, DLS cures objects by passing through a dead zone. That says how it cures objects, so I'm keeping B. C, in DLS, this stuff happens to cure a 3D object layer by layer. So now you see that I have two answers that are doing the thing. So immediately I know I'm going to have to look at the notes at some point because one of these answers is telling me lies. Let's look at choice D. In DLS, UV light is projected through this thing wherein the curing is completed. So here it mentions curing, but it says that the curing is completed. Like, it doesn't say how the curing is done, where the others tell me how. Choice B says by passing through a dead zone. C says layer by layer, but this just says it happens. So D is out because it doesn't actually do the thing. But choice B and choice C both do the thing, if you will. So now I need to figure out which one of them is lying to me. And I would encourage you to pause the video and see if you could find out which one of these has some inaccurate information, but I'll go ahead and point it out to you. So B says, DLS cures 3D objects by passing through a dead zone. So it says DLS passes through a dead zone. And indeed, if we look at step 3, it mentions the dead zone. Step 2 mentions the dead zone. But step 3 says UV light passes through the dead zone. DLS is the process itself. It does not pass through the dead zone. So choice B is lying to us. And if we can find that lie, we should be good to go. But just to confirm that C is correct, basically everything's going to match up with the notes here. So if you want to pause the video and check that out yourself, you can, but I'm not going to waste your time. Let's move on to the next one. And that next one is linear word problems. Linear equations are the most common type of equation. In fact, they make up around 35% of the math section, and word problems are always involved as well. So you're going to come across at least one linear word problem. Now, this particular word problem is what I like to refer to as interpreting part of the equation. And for this one, we notice that we are in y equals mx plus b form. All we have to remember is what everything stands for. So y equals mx plus b, y is going to be our total, is going to be the thing that affects the total. This is often going to be time or a number of items. M is our slope, which is a constant rate of change. And b is our y-intercept, which we want to think of as a starting point. I'll just write the word start since I am out of room. Anyway, so for any sort of word problem, I do recommend starting with the last sentence because we can often get away with just reading the last sentence and then cherry picking from there. So if it's asking us to interpret 39, 39 in this equation is our constant, b. And you might be thinking, what the heck, man? But it's up front. Isn't that m? No, because m is attached to x, right? So they just moved it around a little bit, but this is essentially b. So in our answers, we're going to eliminate anything that's not a starting point. I'm not even going to read the rest of the passage. A says the estimated height at the start of the experiment. That's probably our answer. B says estimated height at the end of the experiment. That's not a starting point. That's an ending point. This is a change in height on each day. Nope. Number of days. Nope. So just like that, without reading anything else, I know that my answer is choice A because that's literally the only starting point. This happens to be another interpretation question, but it's different because we are not in y equals mx plus b. We're not in slope-intercept form. We are in standard form. And in standard form, it's going to be a little bit different. In standard form, we basically have this ax plus by equals c thing going on where x and y are items and a and b are values attached to those items, with c always being a total. It's asking us about 6, which happens to be attached to y. So we're looking for a value attached to y. According to this, y is the number of sides in figure B. So the value attached to the number of sides in figure B would probably be something like each of those sides is 6 inches. So I'm looking for each side of figure B has a length of 6 inches, which is choice A, and I got my answer. Next up, we've got verbs, and you will 100% encounter verbs. In fact, I'm pretty dang sure you're going to encounter both types of verbs that we're going to go over. One of them being subject-verb agreement. And you can tell that it's subject-verb agreement by doing step 1 of any verb question, which is the odd verb out trick. The odd verb out is basically trying to figure out which one of these verbs is singular while the other 3 are plural, or vice versa. And an easy way to do this is to take a singular pronoun like he, she, or it, we'll take she, and then taking the word they and then matching up. So we would say she focuses, we would say they focus, they are focused, and they were focused. So just like that, our odd verb out, the only singular one is A, and that is our answer. We do not need to look at the rest of the passage. Move on. Now this happens to not be subject-verb agreement, but if you start with the same strategy, you're going to find that out pretty quickly. Because if we take, we'll say he this time, he and they, we go to choice A and we say he to have suspended, that doesn't work at all. They to have suspended also does not work at all. So if neither of them work, or in the case of choice D, they both work. He suspended, they suspended, those could both work. Now we know that this is not in fact a subject-verb agreement question, but instead it has something to do with tense. So instead, we're going to take a look at the rest of the passage and try to figure out what makes sense based on tense. Starting from this sentence first, in case we are able to get away with it. He applied bold, saturated hues to large canvases and suspended them from ceilings or walls, causing the drooping fabric to cascade in dramatic loops and curves. All right, so I out loud read choice D, which is our answer. And if you are a native speaker, that is to say you were born speaking English as one of your first languages, you're probably going to be able to just kind of read out loud and get these. However, I know a lot of you guys are not native speakers, so what you want to look for is surrounding context, preferably in the same sentence. So I have the simple past tense applied So I'll want to match the simple past tense suspended. Next up, you will 100% without a doubt be encountering some sort of quadratics on the SAT. There's always going to be quadratics. Now, whether or not it's going to be a word problem like this one, we'll find out. Anyway, with these, you are basically doing the same thing as with the linear stuff that we went over, where you're interpreting some part of the equation. And just like we needed to know about standard form versus slope-intercept form, it's important to know about the different forms of quadratics. So for this one, we're looking at standard form. You can see ax squared plus bx plus c reflected right here. And importantly, in standard form, c is the y-intercept. Now this one, they just so happen to be asking us about the y-intercept. So right off the bat, we know that we're looking for 29 in our answer. So we can get rid of a and we can get rid of c. And just like with slope-intercept form, the y-intercept in a word problem is going to be a starting point. So our starting point, according to this, was the end of May, which means choice B is our answer. And if you want to get a hold of this and a whole bunch of other free cheat sheets, go ahead and use the link in the description of this video. Now, another type of quadratic form that you might come across is this one right here. And this is going to be factored form. So factored form, importantly, we are given our x-intercepts, where P and Q are the x-intercepts. Importantly, just remember that we have this minus, which means whatever's in parentheses is going to get flipped. So our x-intercepts are going to basically be x equals positive 14 and x equals negative 19. Another cool thing about the x-intercepts is that they are always going to be equidistant from the vertex. And whenever we're being asked about the minimum of a quadratic, we're being asked about its vertex. Because if you think about it, well, let's not just think about it, let's actually visualize it. So if I do a quadratic, we're just gonna do like, I don't know. We'll use the one that's here so I can show you both ways, because we could use Desmos for this, but there's a faster way. So if we put, not 119, if we put our quadratic in here, you're gonna, oh, I was already home, that's why. You're gonna notice that if we zoom out, this parabola can only go so far down, right? What I was saying was that the x-intercepts are equidistant from the x-coordinate of the vertex. So basically, if we go up to our x-intercepts, which will be positive 14 and negative 19, they are the same distance away from negative 2.5, which is our vertex in this case. Because of this, instead of plugging this in and getting our answer, which is negative 2.5, also known as 5 over 2, we can just take the average of our x-intercepts. Average being these added together and then divided by 2, right? So 14 minus 19 is negative 5, divided by 2 is negative 5 over 2. So that's a nice little shortcut for these types of questions. And again, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here is laid out in more detail in that cheat sheet bundle I told you about. Link in the description. And finally, you will without a doubt be coming across semicolons on the SAT. Whether or not you're going to encounter both rules, it's hard to say. But the first rule is that semicolons act like periods. And that is going to be what they do, I would say, at least 8 out of 10 times. So if you see two answers like this, where you have just a semicolon and just a period as the difference, I mean, obviously we have a, not capitalized, but that's beside the point. You can eliminate both as long as you don't see any other semicolons in the passage. And we'll talk about that in a second. Here, there's no other semicolons in the passage, so those are out. And then, do we need a comma or not? Well, let's see. While one requires oxygen and one does not, that's an introduction. We always want a comma after an introduction, so our answer is choice C. And yeah, I know I've mentioned it 2 times already, but you're going to see these rules in that cheat sheet bundle that I mentioned earlier. Link in the description. Now, I said that, 8 out of 10 times it's going to be semicolon is the same thing as a period, but there is another rule. And looking at these answer choices, you got to already see some shenanigans going on in them, right? We've got semicolons just like all over the place. So what's happening here? The rule is that you can use semicolons to separate items in a complex list. And a list is complex if it has other punctuation within it. So in this one, for example, we have this person helped produce the first Indigenous language instructional app, Chickasaw Basic, in 2009. So our first item in the list is the world's first instructional app, Chickasaw Basic, in 2009. And we would need a comma here and a comma here to separate just the name Chickasaw Basic itself. But then after that, we have something else. And choice C is going to be our answer to this one, by the way. I'm just going to kind of show you as we go through, because the second item is going to be an online television network, comma, Chickasaw TV in 2010. So you see how that's our second item. It also has commas within it. So we're allowed to use semicolons to separate the items because the items have their own commas. And if there were just commas all over the place, it would get really confusing. And then finally, and a Rosetta Stone language course in Chickasaw in 2015. So that would be an example of a complex list. Now, if you're serious about getting your highest possible score on the SAT, use the link in the description to join the Penguin Test Prep Academy. It includes all of my courses, live classes with me twice a month where I do deep dives into specific SAT topics, and over 800 original practice questions you're not going to find on Blue Book or anywhere else.